So heads up for anyone who is based close to New York, I'm going to be hosting an in-person workshop in Brooklyn next week, next Tuesday actually, on October 22nd, where I'm going to be sharing the insights and then tips and strategies that have helped students in my mentorship program land their first data job. And I actually had someone who I met in my London workshop message me, shout out to Anas, just a few days ago about how the London workshop actually helped him land a data job. So I promise you it'll be a really fun and insightful time. And then at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about what it's like on the actual job and how to stand out. Speaking of New York, I gave a talk at Columbia University sharing some of the insights about the top 5 most common pitfalls of aspiring data analysts today and how to overcome and avoid those pitfalls. And then at the end, we did a live Q&A about questions like interview mistakes, how to stand out in the job hunt, portfolio projects, sponsorship, and certifications. And so today's video is actually a recording of that session. So you'll be getting an Ivy League level workshop. And if you are serious about standing out in the data job hunt and pointing yourself in the right direction and focusing on the right things in your data journey, I promise you it'll be worth your while to watch to the end of this recording when we get to the Q&A section. So shout out to Vivian and the entire Applied Analytics Club for having me and for my little gift. If you would like me to come speak at your school or organization about how to stand out in the job hunt and what the actual job is like, as well as any analytical frameworks and business intuition, then just hit me up on LinkedIn. I would love to come by and speak with you. My last heads up is that the Analytics Accelerator, my mentorship program, is finally opening up applications for the next cohort. I know many of you guys have been asking about this. If you are interested in taking your technical skills to the next level and gaining unique hands-on experience and direct mentorship about how to stand out in the job hunt so that you can become a data analyst in the next few months, then check out the link below where I have opened up applications to get invited to an info session where I'll be talking more about how the program works and gets you to where you want to go. Okay, let's dive into the recording. Okay, cool. I'm no longer being blinded. I can actually see you guys now. Can you raise your hand if you are a grad student? Okay. Oh, most of you guys are grad students. Okay. And then how many of you guys are undergrad then? So there's no freshmen and sophomores here. Okay, cool. So I'm guessing most of you guys are kind of in the process of job hunting stuff now, right? Okay. So my goal today is going to be to give you guys the blueprint of the most important things to focus on in your job hunt. And it's based not only on my experience as a hiring manager, but actually more so on the experiences and the learnings and the observations of the students in the mentorship program, especially those students who have been the most successful. So that's what we're gonna dive in today. There we go. Nice.
It's not working now.
Okay, sweet. I just want to get a feel for how you guys are all feeling about job hunt stuff right now. So if you want to give me a hand raise and just let me know if any of these apply to you. How many of you guys feel like you've already done some schoolwork, you've done some self-studying, but you don't have a clear roadmap on what it takes to get a job in data? Anyone? Don't be shy.
Your resume with stuff because all of them, like, I can't relate to all of them.
You will see that there's a lot more people than you think who are in the same boat as you guys. What about feeling like you have technical skills but are not sure how to actually apply them in a real work setting? Yes?
Yes, well.
Okay. Me still sometimes. And also, have any of you guys started applying to jobs and are just feeling like you're submitting your resume to a digital black hole? Yes? Okay.
Christine, just a quick question. Do you actually read students' resume from a hiring manager's perspective? Are you guys really reading our resumes?
Yes. Is this like the secret question that everyone's been waiting for? So yeah, people do actually read resumes, especially at small to medium-sized companies where people have the best chance of transitioning into the industry. So yes, your resume is not going to a digital black hole and just sinking to the abyss. The thing is, you really need to focus on actually standing out, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. By the way, guys, it is going to be an interactive session, so I will be asking for more hand raises and I will have questions for you guys. So please don't feel shy and please help me out with the questions. So what I want to talk about today is share with you guys the most common pitfalls that I see data analysts fall in today, and hopefully it save you a bit of heartache and tears. We're going to talk about some ideas on how to get real world experience to build confidence in your ability to actually apply analytic skills to the job. And then we're also going to talk about some of the traits that actually make people stand out across the job hunt, across all levels and also across all industries. These are the top 5 most common pitfalls that I see among students, whether that be undergrad or grad students. One is building a resume before having concrete experience. 2 is building portfolios without relevant business context. 3 is spraying and praying. And by that, I mean sending out hundreds of resumes. 4 is getting lost in translation. So not translating your experience in a way that actually resonates with data hiring managers. And then 5 is over-focusing on technical skills. So if you're guilty of all 5 of these, raise your hand. No, I'm kidding. I won't make you.
I am.
But in your mind, check which one of these you are falling into today. And my goal is going to be to help you think about how to overcome these challenges and how to think about it in another way. Okay. So pitfall number 1, building resumes without yet having team, context, and organizational experience. It totally makes sense. When you guys are job hunting, you might be wondering, how can I get experience if I don't have experience, right? There's a lot of different ways to actually do this. So since most of you guys are actually grad students, I'm assuming many of you guys already have internships or even full-time work opportunities. And whether that's paid or unpaid, it's fine, as long as there's actually data relevance on there. Of course, it belongs on your resume. There's also a lot of other things that you guys can be doing to get data relevant experience without needing to get full-time opportunities. So one of them is fellowships. I don't know if we were able to click on that link. Blue Bonnet Data is an example of this. So it's a volunteering platform where you actually do a really quick interview. You work as a data analyst for a progressive campaign, and you're working with a real team. You have real stakeholders, and you work with real data. And so at the end of this, you're more like a freelance data analyst, and you actually get technical mentorship throughout the entire process. And then the other is actually volunteering opportunities. So there's a few different websites here as well. There's Catchafire, and then also Volunteer Match. And these volunteering platforms are awesome because they, again, are building a bridge to having data experience in an organizational context. So Catchafire is great because you get the opportunity to actually work with Google Analytics data. A lot of their projects are focused on working with GA data. And when we're working on our portfolio projects, I think one of the hardest things is finding real data, right? Finding data that is actually big enough that it's impressive. Usually when a company is using Google Analytics data, it's a lot of data because GA is for website data. So check out Catchafire. And then Volunteer Match is another one where you can filter down to skills where it's looking for dashboarding and reporting. Yeah. And this is great for anyone who's interested more in financial analytics. A lot of their organizations are looking for that kind of help. The last one I was going to say, and this applies more to undergrads, but is to just think a little bit more creatively about how you can use your secondary network for real work experience. And this could be friends of friends. This could be parents' friends. This could even be local shops that have real data that could use someone's help in understanding the trends and analyzing it. Just a really quick story here. When I took a year off of working in data in 2019, and in that time, I didn't want my data skills to fall to the wayside. So I printed out a physical copy of my resume and I took it to stores in Brooklyn, like door to door, and basically pitched myself as a data analyst and said, if you're looking for someone to help you understand your trends in sales, help make some basic projections and Excel reports, and I can do that. So I ended up working with a thrift store owner in Brooklyn for like a few months and just built some really simple Excel models for her to understand the forecast for the next few months and give some recommendations about how she should allocate her resources. And this is a kind of opportunity that you could put on your resume as someone who's working as a data analyst, right? Which is much more valuable than saying that you're working on these kinds of portfolio projects, which can be a little bit more isolated. Okay. Pitfall number 2. Have any of you guys worked on portfolio projects? Yes? Okay. Very few, actually.
That's how I discovered Christy, because I was working on my portfolio.
I guess it's because you guys probably also have work experience, so you don't necessarily need to focus too much on portfolio projects, but just something to keep in mind here when it comes to portfolio projects is that companies are really interested in understanding the impact that you can bring. So not just formulas and functions. What I usually see that's more applicable to undergrads probably is that the projects tend to focus too much on the technical stuff. So you want to impress hiring managers through projects that are geared towards a real work context. And there's 4 different dimensions or aspects that you can think about when we're talking about, okay, what does a hiring manager actually care about? The first is working with data that is widely applicable across industries. When you're like, well, I don't want to like pigeonhole myself into one industry, the way to overcome that is by working with data sets that apply to a variety of different kinds of companies. And so I always recommend either finance or marketing data, because every company wants to make money and every company wants to be known. So of course, like, it's going to relate to every company. And we can talk more if you guys have questions about how to actually find or create these kinds of data sets. Question for you guys, actually. Does anyone know what the phrase actionable insights actually means? What does it mean? It's such a buzzword. We have it. Go for it. Yes, yes. And it's basically a fancy buzzword for saying, take what you are observing in the data, bring it to the surface, translate it to plain English or whatever language you're working in, and bring it back to the stakeholder. And the stakeholder is just a fancy word for the person you are working with at work. So find something that, answers the questions that your stakeholders are asking, explain it in a way that's easy to understand, and relate it back to the team member. And I will show you guys some examples of what these insights look like as well. Stakeholders, so any projects or any kind of data that relates to a team, whether that be a marketing team, a product team, a finance team, always thinking about how is this relevant to an actual person. And then lastly, industry best practices. Does anyone know what I mean by best practices? Sorry, say that again. Common across industries, okay. What else? Yeah, okay, rules to follow, I like that. So it's basically the rules to follow that are common across industries, like the most practical ways of using the tools at work. When you go to Tableau Public, for example, if any of you guys have looked at the Tableau Public site, there's dashboards that use like all the colors in the rainbow, and it looks like it belongs in the Modern Museum of Art. But we are not actually using dashboards like this at work, right? So a lot of times people are thinking too much about flexing all the skills at once. Instead, my recommendation is to actually research what are the industry best practices before you start on any data project at any company. So what are the best practices for visualization? What are the best practices for documentation? And then what are the best practices for code? And that's like formatting code, how to actually structure your code.
As you were talking about projects, I think it's like how could you help us like identify how could we like solve associate our project with a key business need? Because I know a lot of us here probably have a lot of project at school, and how do we distinguish ourselves from our classmates?
Yeah. One way to do that is that you actually need to step back before you start working on a project and understand the concept of business metrics a little bit. Business metrics is just the numbers that a company needs to track to understand why their company is doing well or doing badly. So at the end, I'll actually show you one of the videos that I would recommend watching. But the main thing that you could do is research, like, for the industries that I'm interested in working in, what are the top 5 business metrics to track the performance of that company, right? Finance, product sales, they all have different business metrics. If you can understand what those metrics are, how to calculate them, then you can start to reverse engineer the kind of data that you should be working with. So start with the metrics first. That will give you the context, and then find the data sets, and then basically propose the kinds of questions that would be asked of those metrics. This is another example where like you could use ChatGPT to help you, but the question is basically always, why has this metric gone up or down? Or what are the trends in this metric? Those are like very common data analyst questions. So insert your desired industry and metric there. And then that is one way to just start thinking about how to apply the business context to the project. So just really quick, maybe this doesn't apply so much to you guys, but a word of warning to not have your projects look like this. So Google Analytics certification project, SQL project 1, SQL project 2, it's very generic. It talks about the technical tools, and it talks about what, like it says that we're finding recommendations, but it's not saying anything of what we actually discovered. And that's actually what we're interested in. We're trying to understand, why did you use the tool? Why is it important? What should I do with your analysis? And so the same goes for this project over here, which is about the US Open. So it's about player stats. And again, it's just too niche and too personal to make it relevant to a company's bottom line. If we go to the next slide, though, you'll see an example of a README that I talk about in that video. And This is an example of a README that looks the way that we actually present insights at work. So the more you can show your insights and your recommendations, like an experienced data analyst, the easier it's going to be for you to transition into the industry, because a hiring manager will very easily be able to see what kind of work that you can do. So I talk about this way more in detail in that video, but from a high level summary, there's an overview, an executive summary, sales trends where we deep dive into the different trends. And then at the very bottom, we talk about assumptions and caveats and recommendations. And it's the same way that we actually present our insights to stakeholders across many different kind of data analyst jobs at work. GitHub is also just a tool that we use so much at work. So it's great to get practice using the real data ecosystem right now anyways. Pitfall number 3. I think this one is the one that maybe most people I've seen are guilty of, which is sending your resume to just like tons of postings because you want to feel that you're sending your application out somewhere. But right now, because the job market is quite competitive, it's actually much more effective to focus on piercing through the noise with a targeted strategy. So, in the end, we all have the same amount of time in the day. It's more so about how you're spending that time to actually make it to the other side that makes a really big difference. In the end, it only takes one job that you're actually excited about to get in the industry, right? We're not trying to get like hundreds of offers. How many of you guys are international students and have like sponsorship?
I would say like 90% of people I met in Colombia in grad school are international students.
Okay. Yeah. So I know for most of you, then you'll have to think about like sponsorship, you have visa kind of things to think about. What I will say on this note right now is that you need to have a balance actually between the playing the numbers game and still focusing on standing out. I think a lot of international students start to think like, okay, I'm going to have to just apply to way more than everyone else. I would actually flip that and say that the bar is a little bit higher for you. So focus more on being a standout fit so that when you're actually applying, you don't have to send out as many applications as you think you do. In the end, it's going to be about standing out in the interview so that by the time they make you an offer, they are also willing and able to go through that sponsorship process. And I can talk more about that in the Q&A too. Yeah. There's 3 different ways to think about the job hunt process that can be a little bit more strategic than spraying and praying. One is using diverse job boards. So we don't have to click on these necessarily, but these are links that all have postings from companies that are a little bit, on the outside of LinkedIn. So there's fewer applicants, but they're all still really great companies. They're still small to medium size, especially tech companies and startups. Auto.com is great because you actually input your work experience and your preferences, and then it matches you. So it's like Hinge for job applications. And then there's dataanalyst.com, progressivedatajobs.com, and businessanalyst.com. Those are all more focused on data jobs. So it just helps you a little bit with the searching because they all have postings that are really directly for data.
So not just LinkedIn and Indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, diversify the job posting, the job where you're looking at, definitely.
Yeah. And then the last 2 are applying for the right jobs. So this goes back to building your bridge to that experience. If you satisfy more than 70% of the bullets on that posting, then that is what I would say something where you're actually a fit. If it's less than 70%, you will probably be up against people who have more of those qualifications, right? So at that point, that's why it's more effective to focus on getting that experience first, so that by the time you apply, you're really a fit for more jobs.
As you were talking about fit, I was curious, for students, how do we know we are fit? Do we match our resume and experience with the job description, or should we network to like from the company's like employee to get a better understanding of the company?
It's hard to be able to speak with someone from every company, right? It takes a lot of effort on your part as well. If you guys look at 5 to 10 data analyst job postings, you will start to see that many of them have the same traits. They're just saying it in slightly different ways, right? But they're always talking about reporting, dashboarding, presenting to different stakeholders, working with different teams. That's what they say cross-functionally, right? Working across different teams, working with business metrics, like that core stuff. Once you can satisfy those main areas in your experience and it shows up in your resume, you probably can apply to many, many data jobs. It's just like before you have those skills, it's probably not the best use of your time yet to start applying if you don't satisfy those core things. To be super concrete, like the technical stuff is Excel, SQL, and a visualization software. So Looker, Tableau, Power BI, maybe a bit of Python and R. Okay, the last thing I was gonna say there is also value-driven networking. Have people been networking? Like, do people go to events, send messages out? One thing I would say to not do is send a message that looks like this. I'll read some of them so you don't have to squint. These messages are pretty much like, hi, blank, thank you for connecting. I'm a graduating senior. I am looking for a job and would really love your help. Here's my resume attached. These kinds of messages are really not that effective because hiring managers and recruiters, they just get so many of these messages. And as much as they probably would like to be able to sift through all of them and help everyone, it's just not really, it's hard for them to differentiate between who is who, right? So please don't send these kinds of messages. It's not the best use of your time. Instead, focus on crafting a more compelling message that shows someone what you could bring. This is an example. This is a template that one of my students wrote, and she got 5 interviews in 5 weeks with this kind of template. And many people talk about after using this template, they get interviews within like 3 days or like a few hours. Sometimes it happens. This is a message that she sent to a hiring manager on LinkedIn. Hi, Stephen. I was excited to learn about an opportunity for a research associate to join the long COVID team at Evercure. I deeply resonate with Evercure's mission to unlock the full potential of every FDA-approved drug to save patients' lives. I'm a great fit for the position because my academic background in biomedical research means I'm a strong analytical thinker. I also bring to the table excellent communication skills and a sharp eye for detail. I'm proficient in various data analytics tools and have leveraged my technical skill set to derive actionable insights across several industries. And while I have no doubt that there are plenty of qualified applications for this position, I think I'm uniquely positioned to hit the ground running with the team. And a copy of my resume is attached here for your reference. So this message, I mean, the impression that it leaves me with is something more along the lines of, I'm really excited about this job. Here's specifically how I can help your team. And if you're available and want to read more, here's my resume, which is very different from the first kind of messages that are like, hi, stranger, please read my resume and refer me.
Yes. You have to be a little bit more specific because I was reading this as I was preparing. I thought this almost looked like a cover letter, and you, as you were mentioned that we have to like networking is a very time like consuming stuff, and for students they probably are like juggling like trying to network with different professionals. Is there any advice on how they can maybe reproduce this to different alumni or contact?
70% of this should be reused because at this point, this is part of your story. Like these points about why you stand out, that's part of your narrative that carries across all data analyst positions. The only thing I would change is that first sentence. And one thing I was going to say is send this message out to the jobs where you really are a standout fit. Like you genuinely look at that job description and you're like, I have this, I have this, I have this. I really think I would stand out. Because that's where it's most effective, where a hiring manager would be like, oh, wow, this person, like, I can't ignore this person. So in that case, like, you're not sending out like more than 30 of these kinds of messages a month. Honestly, I would say even 5 to 10 a month is a good number. And so just change that first sentence to make it specific to the company. Do a little bit of research on that company. In terms of how to send this out, does anyone here have LinkedIn Premium? Okay, good. So some of you guys already have it. I know it's a little bit expensive, especially for students, but I do recommend using it because if you can send like 5 to 10 of these kinds of messages a month, it's a lot more effective numbers wise than to send out like 50 cold resumes. Like these kinds of messages will go farther. So I recommend investing in LinkedIn Premium for a few months when you're job hunting. And then of course you can send it when you see the hiring manager, or if you don't see the hiring manager, you can go to the people page in a company site and look up technical recruiter. And then you'll probably see a few of them. What I would do is actually go to that person's profile, see the people who have had some kind of recent activity in the last few weeks, send this message to one of those people, right? So you have to have a connection request, really short message, and then send this message after. And at the end, you can just have a line that says, you know, let me know if there's someone who's better to reach out to, or feel free to forward this to your team.
And don't worry if you guys can't see it. We'll send out the presentation to everyone. So don't look stare at it.
Take a picture, zoom in. Okay. Are you guys still with me? Yes? Okay, cool. So the fourth pitfall is getting lost in translation. And by that, I mean thinking too much about your experience without how to actually talk about this to the person who is wondering how you're going to help their team. So remember that data hiring managers are interested in how your past experience is relevant to their team. So you want to focus on translating your experience, whether that's projects, work experience, internship, schoolwork, to an analytics relevant narrative. And there's 4 main aspects that you want to focus on here. One, of course, the technical tools. If you have technical tools, always mention them. Insights and recommendations, working with stakeholders and teams, as I said, and then communication and presentations. So these are the 4 main angles that the more you can hit on them in your resume bullets, the better. And if you're ever like, well, I don't know if this experience relates to data analytics, if it has one of these 4, then I would just make sure to mention that. And that's the way to do that translation. Okay, and I'm going to have a question for you guys at the end of this bullet, so pay attention. Healthcare Tableau dashboard. This is an example of a resume bullet. Created an interactive Tableau dashboard with drill down capabilities to track KPIs, providing actionable insights on 12K sales and healthcare records. So do we have any thoughts on why this bullet is, it's okay, it's fine, it makes sense, but what's not so great about this bullet? Go ahead. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good one.
Anything else from Christine's presentation in the last 30 minutes?
Pop quiz. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, nice. Yeah, so both of those are really good. This bullet, it's okay. It does touch on all 4, like those aspects, right? But it's just not that detailed. Like all of you could probably say a bullet like this if you've built a Tableau dashboard. This is how I would describe this bullet on a resume instead, and how I would also talk about it in an interview. So I renamed it Row Health Performance Dashboard, created a dynamic Tableau dashboard to measure marketing and claims metrics like click-through rate, sign-up rate, and average claim amount to explore insights for a sample healthcare company, use dashboard to reveal insights on campaign categories and form recommendations for marketing budget, create a presentation to illustrate recommendations to marketing team and help refine budget decisions for 2024. So there's a few main things here. One, I named it some kind of company name, right? I wasn't like, I did this project for fun. I made it look more realistic. And I also talked more about who it's relevant to. And the big thing here is that I mentioned the metrics. So click-through rate, sign-up rate, average claim amount, that tells a hiring manager a lot more about the kind of domain knowledge that you have. And then at the end, as you said, so I added more about what are the recommendations. So 4 recommendations for marketing budget. It's about the marketing budget. I didn't go super into detail, which is okay, but it helps someone really understand the kind of work that you're really doing. An exercise that I think is helpful as you're building your resumes is, you know, when you have the first version of the bullet, you should actually talk out loud, like say out loud what it is that you were doing in that project. And I think you will find that you have a lot more details to actually say that aren't really coming out. This is actually related to a concept that I call degrees of detail thinking, which is just a lot of times early career data analysts think that everything is equally important. I mean, it's a communication skill, right? Everyone thinks that everything is equally important first, like the data set, the technical tools, the insights, the recommendations, and all this stuff. For a hiring manager, the most important thing is that impact and the metrics. So making sure that you bring that stuff to the surface. What I've done in this bullet here is I've just gone 1 degree of detail lower than the first bullet. Right? So when I say metrics, what metrics? When I say stakeholder, what stakeholder? When I say data set, what was the data set? So that's really what I'm doing here in making that translation.
Can you guys like see how what Christine's actually doing more clearly in this bullet point, like what she's looking at? Could you guys see the difference?
The key phrase, I mean, even just look at the length of the bullet, right? Just as a benchmark, like stretch yourself to try to make a bullet that is 2 or 3 lines long. And I think that will help a little bit in bringing out the details. Almost there. The last pitfall is just over-focusing on technical skills. I'm actually, well, I mean, I guess I'll talk to you guys about this a little bit after the panel, but I'm curious about how much what you're learning in class is really focused on the technical stuff versus like the communication and the soft skills. because what I see over and over again is that the technical skills, they open the door to the interviews, but the soft skills, the communication, the presentations, negotiations, that is what opens the door to the actual job. And I always see that the students who have the strongest communication skills paired with their technical skills are the ones who either get the job the fastest or they get the best jobs, the jobs that they're really excited about. So my recommendations is to really think about how you can actually practice your soft skills, because one, what's awesome about being in school, and one thing that I really miss, is being in a room where everyone is actually on a similar journey as you and working with each other to practice the collaboration aspect and also practice about talking your thinking out loud the same way that you would on a team, because that's what you do in the interviews. So work with each other, practice your thinking out loud. You can even say like, let's actually discuss our thought process out loud for this project, because it's great practice for interviews.
I was a little bit curious for soft skills. We didn't have like very clear matrix, like the technical skill. How could we showcase that on our resume that can be picked up by hiring manager?
You can demonstrate it by talking about the times that you have worked cross-functionally. Again, just a fancy word for saying you've worked with other teams. When you have presented to anyone, and when you've presented to people, say who you presented to, say what you were presenting on, say what was the effect of the presentation, and anytime you have led or conducted meetings. So those are just really practical ways where every day you're practicing your soft skills, right? And they do belong on your resume too. The last point I'll say here is also to start thinking about your narrative. I don't know if we really talk about this that much in the job hunt, but one thing that I've seen really work for students in my program is that they start to really think about, okay, how do all my previous experiences, my personality traits, my curiosities, and all my goals combine to make me a strong analyst today as is? I think a lot of times when, if you're in grad school, you've maybe had some previous work experience, you have a bachelor's degree, it can seem very fragmented to be like, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that, and now I want to be a data analyst. So think instead about that phrasing and how you can have a story of, instead of something like that, it's more like, this experience in A taught me these things, and now I'm really excited to bring that to B. So this is just two examples of students. Darshan, again, his resume was in the example earlier. He was an undergrad, and his story was that he had combined experience, leadership experience from managing a lab team. He was naturally inquisitive from his research work, and he combined this with his technical and analytical skills. This story and him just being really confident in the tell me about yourself question helped him land 2 internship offers in 1 week. And then on the next slide, so Jennifer was a grad student.
Just like you.
And she had a few years of working experience, and then she did a business analytics master's. And so her combined story was that she had marketing and operations domain experience, soft skills from loan officer work, and then analytic skills from her master's program. And she was someone who had landed an offer in just 5 weeks with almost a 30% salary increase.
So yeah, Christine, I think you talk about great student, but how can we also get like a 30% salary increase or maybe land a job with another?
There are many ways to go about it. I mean, hopefully this gives you like a high level roadmap for the things to focus on. For anyone who's curious, the way that the mentorship program works is it's a small group mentorship program. It's 3 months long for 20 ambitious aspiring analysts at a time who want to become a standout analyst. And it's a combination, you can kind of think of it as like a hybrid internship mentorship program. It's a combination of direct mentorship, real world projects, job hunt strategy, and also just meeting a diverse community of other people from around the world, because it is online. It is application based, and I will open applications in November for the next cohort starting in January. If we go to the next slide, you can see like a high level overview of the curriculum. This is just a snapshot of students from the last cohort, but we learn and practice and apply the technical skills, the soft skills, the domain knowledge, and the business thinking and analytical thinking that we use on the job. And then together we create a package to help you land a job in data as soon as possible.
So if you're interested, you have to apply very early. That by the time I discover Christine, her September cohort has already closed.
Yeah. Yes, hopefully. Well, last time I think that it was filled in 2 weeks or so, but I'll send out more info about the next cohort in the newsletter if you sign up for the newsletter, so you can hear more ahead of time, so you won't be closed out. I'm just curious, and no pressure, guys. Has anyone watched my YouTube videos? I put together just this mini curriculum for you guys. It's like 2 hours long, just for you to start thinking about your North Star for what to focus on. I know there's just like so much information on YouTube. This is really just focus on job hunt stuff. So if you have this, all your projects, you will at least hopefully, channel it in the right direction. So first, understanding the high level roadmap for how to get to a data job. Then how to build a standout project. This applies to work projects, school projects, portfolio projects. Then the longer video that I talked about, which is understanding business metrics. So the logic behind why business metrics are important and how to think about them. Then how to build a hard to ignore resume, deep dive more into like the bullets and how to make those kinds of that resume. And then also how to use a targeted job hunt strategy.
Yeah, if you want to click on one of the videos, those are already linked to the video. So like when we share the presentations, like you will be able to see the.
Nice.
Yeah, we might not be able to click on the presentation view, but those are already linked to Christine's video.
Very smart. Okay. Just a quick note to how to stay in touch. So my LinkedIn, my YouTube, my website, this is just a QR code for the newsletter. I promise to not bombard you guys with boring newsletters. I just sent a broadcast out twice a month that has tips, like the more practical tips about what you can do right now for job hunt stuff. And then if you guys want to hang out with me more, I'm going to do a meetup just for fun, building more of a community of other New York data analysts. So it's a combination of a free workshop. It's actually going to be some of the same stuff here. So you guys will be pros by then. And a combination of that plus networking. And it's going to be in Brooklyn.
And now we're going to head into the Q&A session. Do we have any question from the audience here at Times Square? And do we have any questions from the Zoom? You can raise your hand for questions.
Also, feel free to ask like literally any questions. It can be even about past work experience and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to just be a job hunt. Yep. Hi. Yeah. So is your question mostly about the fact that there's a transition, right, between working in India and working in the US? So one thing to think about getting more experience with is actually how to get more exposure to American working culture. In previous jobs, I've worked with a team based in India, and obviously there's differences in communication. I wouldn't say there's actually that much differences in the technical skill and like the best practices. Like you don't have to think too much about what does that look like at an American company. I think it's more so about like communication, presentations, meetings, working with stakeholders. How does that differ in culture from any country to working in the US? I think one of the things that are a little bit tougher when people are transitioning from another culture is like the American model of like hyper efficiency, right? In meetings, we're like, it gets right to the agenda, the way that we actually structure our presentations. One thing that I would do, and I'm just kind of like thinking a little bit out loud here, is in your coffee chats, I would ask more specifically about this. So when you go to networking events, when you're meeting other data analysts who are based in American companies, you probably already have a sense for the kind of projects that they do because it is quite similar. It's always reports, dashboarding, insights, and presentations. But ask more so about like how your meetings run. What do your stakeholders actually really care about? What are the goals of the company and how is that translated to the rest of the team? And focus more on like the soft skill part of that to show that understanding in your interviews. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah. So question is basically around like there's multiple rounds for an interview, right? So the first round is usually it's like a recruiter round. So usually 15 to 30 minutes of someone doing an initial check, just confirming like what you say in your resume you can actually talk about and that you can speak well about it. Then the next stage is the hiring manager stage usually, where it's like 30 minutes to an hour, and that's usually the person who would actually be working with you as your manager. Somewhere along there, you might get a technical take home, or you might get a live technical. So like a quiz or something that you have to complete within a certain period of time. And then after that, you move on to the panel interview, which usually has like 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes a little bit more, depending on where you are in your career. of other data analysts, other stakeholders, and then other people who are higher up on the data team. So sometimes people get stuck at that first round where they're like they're doing the recruiter interview, and for whatever reason, they're not making it to the next round, or just in general, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we're really looking for and getting to the next round, the first stage is actually more so about fundamental communication. So there's a few things to focus on for this stage. One is you're probably going to get asked the question, the tell me about yourself question. There's no excuse for you to not nail this question because you guys know that you're going to get asked this question. You have time to practice it. So this is where the narrative piece comes in. So thinking about like that question that I asked you guys earlier, how does all your experiences combine to make you a strong analyst? This is where it's great if you can have a little bit of a story to tell. Actually, in the program yesterday, we had a guest workshop by Chris Chen, he's big on LinkedIn and he's a data communication and storytelling coach. And he did a workshop for us about how to tell a story for the about you question. And one thing that he mentioned is that it's really compelling if you can actually sprinkle in a story about a challenge that you overcame and how that led you to your data journey. So that's something that really sticks out a little bit more with a recruiter who's doing many, many interviews. So the about you question, really thinking about like, how does your story come together? How can you explain that to someone clearly in less than 2 minutes? You pretty much want to end on a sentence that is like, and these combined experiences now have me eager to contribute to this data analytics role in this way, right? Leading to the present day. And then the second thing is just be able to speak about your resume clearly. I think one of the things that people struggle with the most when they're nervous is just rambling. Like when you can't finish a sentence and you're like, the sentence keeps going and I can't stop. So one thing that you can do to stop yourself and help yourself out if that happens is just say something like, you notice it happening, just say something like, and I'm happy to go into more detail about that if you like, right? So then just stopping there. And that's kind of the main thing in the first round. Sometimes they'll throw in like a technical interview, a technical question just to get a sense of where you are, but that's probably more for the higher level roles. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. So the first question is like a lot of times in initial screenings, they'll say like, do you need sponsorship now or ever? Okay. So I'll be really real with you guys. This does actually, it can filter you out, especially if they get lots of applicants that don't need sponsorship, which is the reality with really big companies, right? They just have so many people who are applying. So this is what I would say for this. If you do not need sponsorship right now, like if it is not something that's really urgent and it's your priority more so to actually get the job, you can say that you don't need sponsorship right now, right? But it does mean that later on in the interview process, you have to be okay with the risks that are associated with this, which is that later on, if they ask you, okay, now that you're in the final rounds and do you need an interview, will you need sponsorship in like 2 years, right? And there you have to be honest because you don't want to take a job that isn't going to lead up to that. So what I have seen is that some people, they go through the interview process and they negotiate that at the end, where at that point, like if you're a really strong fit and you've done so well in the interviews, people are like, let's just make this happen for this person, right?
Yeah, let's just go to Zoom question very quickly. We have a student asking before, what is a great time to ask for referral when you're networking with someone?
I mean, this is also relevant to your second question too, which is like, I think your question was, do you have an easier chance if you have a connection at a company, right? If you've already been referred on the platform, is it easier than other candidates? To be honest, it depends on the strength of the referral. So what happens in the back end is when we put in a referral, we also have a note about why this person is qualified for this job, which is why like when you send that networking message and you're like, hi stranger, please send my resume in for a referral. The referral is not going to be that strong, right? So it doesn't really count for that much. It's like kind of as if someone had just submitted it for you. But if that referral is very strong because you met them, you've talked with them, that they're like, I think they would be a great fit, then it can help. But once you get to the first round, everything's fair game. So like once you get to the first round, the referral it doesn't really help you that much, right? Unless that person is like high up and really talking about why you're a good fit for the company. But I would say it doesn't overcome not having or not standing out on the fundamental things. And then what is a great time to ask for a referral during networking? I think after you have a first conversation with them and you do two things in that conversation. One, learn about them, like have a genuine interest in the other person, understand what they do for work, why they like it, what their goals are, maybe how it matches up with your goals. And then after that first conversation, I would say it's fair to ask for a referral and just say something along the lines of, really enjoyed our conversations. It really furthered my interest in what you do and what this company is doing. Here's my resume. I saw that you guys have an opening. So if you'd be so kind to refer me, like at least that person has more information about you at that point.
As we're talking about refer, I just want to ask a quick follow-up question. Should students be very clear about like their like where their approach or networking, like they are like looking for a referral, or they should go into asking a referral maybe later on the stage? Should they be very clear about that at first?
I don't think it matters too much. I would say try to approach the conversation with genuine curiosity. And that always goes further than being like, I'm only talking to you because I want a referral. I mean, genuine curiosity will take you very far anyways. So like approaching these conversations with genuinely being like, I just want to understand what you do and see if it overlaps with what I'm interested in, and then go for the referral. Yeah, I don't think you have to be super obvious about saying like, I want to do a coffee chat because I want to have a referral. Just approach the person just to learn a little bit more about what they do and then go from there.
We have one more question on Zoom. So Lin asks, you said experience is more important than certificate, but she would love to know, like in your opinion, what are some of the most important certificate maybe we should get that might be can enhance your resume?
So I actually don't think there are really any certificates that really enhance your resume more than experience. It's only if there are really specific technologies that have certificates like cloud, like AWS cloud certification, for example, or like maybe a Tableau or Looker certification, or like a project management certification, like certifications that are more unique to that job. But the GA certification and the IBM certification, I don't think it's actually going to add points in your resume. Experience is way more important. So focus more on those. And yeah, I would say don't focus too much on those kind of like supplementary certifications for right now. So, okay, so you're talking about like the two layers to basically connect to someone, right? Because when you connect, you have to send a short message and then you can send a longer message. In the short message, you can say something that's pretty much along the lines of, especially when the job, because you're probably doing that when the job has been posted. Like, don't waste too much time on that if there's not actually a relevant opening. Something along the lines of like, I was super excited to see this role. And then if you can fit it, I actually haven't tested this. One sentence that has like the phrases that captures what skills you bring, right? My analytical mindset, my background in research, and my combined experience in scientific, writing seems like a really strong fit where I could help your team, where I could help hit the ground running on your team. Would love to connect. Something like that. Really abbreviated, and then you can send a longer message. Yeah. Has anyone ever dispelled the myth of the LinkedIn count? Like over 100 applicants. Do you guys know what the real deal is with this?
Just like clicked it, and then it's like it's an applicant.
So it's not tracking real applicants. So first of all, don't be too deterred by that number, because so many of those numbers are just clicks and they're not actually good fits. But it doesn't have to be within 24 hours. I think it's really hard to do that, to be honest. The rule of thumb is probably within 2 days to a week, because at that point, like, recruiters are moving forward with the first batch of resumes that they see. So you want to get within the first qualified batch, which is like 2 days to a week, to not like drive yourself crazy and like have to check LinkedIn all the time. I just recommend checking LinkedIn like 2 to 3 times a week and just scooping all the most recently posted jobs and on the other job boards too. If you are to get an interview for a company, it usually will happen quite quickly if it's going to happen, right? Once it's been like a few weeks, it probably means that they're close to hiring another candidate or they haven't gotten to the resume yet. So that's what you're trying to avoid, like falling into that kind of no man's land just by applying within the first 4 or 5 days. Can you give me an example? Yeah. So I don't have as much experience in software development to product manager, but here the logic I think is still similar. Where like there's no way to get around the fact that you have to build a bridge to get more experience, right? Like software development, project management. So two things. Think about what are the things that really translate from software development to product management. Well, first of all, you have to understand how the product works on the back end. You have to do a bit of project management, because if you're like working with tickets and stuff, like product managers work with tickets, you have to probably have some kind of understanding of like a roadmap, So think about the things that translate between the two of them. Start building your resume on those points. But you do still have to build the things that are in between. Product management is especially interesting because it's like the kind of position that people usually transition into. Like people don't study and then jump to product management. And so one, think about, are you working right now in a company? Okay. So, well, one thing I would say is like, if you can, get exposure to your current company when you were working, of course, like that's always the best way to transition to any industry. You basically tap that team and you're like, hey, can I sit in on your meetings? Can I see your Slack channel? Can I see your emails? Can I see your projects? Like you have to understand what exactly they're doing. And then that gives you exposure and you can start to actually kind of like move towards that at the company sometimes. But otherwise, look up product management fellowships, product management internships that you can do during the school year. And if you were to tap into your secondary network for opportunities, think more in the product management lens. This would be a little bit trickier because usually product managers work with team members like engineers and data analysts and stuff. And then also with the coffee chats with people, of course, focusing more about like understanding what they do at work so that you can see how you can bring that into your schoolwork too.
I think I'm going to take the last three questions here and the question on Zoom. Can we just go here first?
Yeah, so what kind of projects are they? They're Tableau projects? Okay. Yeah, so schoolwork in general, school projects in general, if they hit on 2 or 4 of those like different aspects that I was talking about, so business metrics, realistic data that has to do with a stakeholder, you can include that on your resume as long as you can translate it in a way that represents how we talk about it at work, right? So don't say like, this was a school project done for my capstone work. Instead, be like, this project surfaced insights for a marketing geared towards a marketing team. So that we understand like this wasn't done just completely in isolation for fun. Like it was done as a real work project. But this is where I would say like try to not make more than 40% of your resume these kinds of projects because the experience of working on a team is actually really important. Yeah. Is that happening to you right now? Okay. Well, you have a champagne problem, so it's a good problem to have. So the question is basically like, if you get an offer and then you kind of want to take it because you want to have a job, but then you get potentially an interview for a better offer, what to do, right? There's a few things you should do. My rule of thumb here is like, it is probably better to be honest with both companies because you don't want to burn any bridges, especially for a role where you're first transitioning into the industry. It has happened at companies where someone takes a job, then 2 weeks later they quit it. And it doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good for you as a person either. The way that I would go about it is actually just to say like, I'm really grateful and interested in this position, but I have an interview coming up for this company. I want to go through the interview process to make sure that this position is the best fit for both of us, right? Because they also don't want you to take a job if you're not sure. So the first thing is to try to negotiate a little bit more time. Then the second thing is really to, I think, also ask the second company if they can speed up the process. Because realistically, if a company really needs to, they can shorten the interview process to like 2 weeks, right? Because it's like 2, 3, maybe max 4 rounds. So it can be done in 2 weeks if they really want to go through the process. So try to shorten the timeline or widen the timeline with the first company before you say yes. And if, push comes to shove and that's what you end up doing, what you have to deal with is like, later on, if the company remembers you, the hiring manager goes somewhere else and they kind of remember that happened. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't say like you owe something like deeply ethical to a company, but it's more so the consideration that if you do that, then you will probably leave a bad taste in someone's mouth for the people on that hiring team. So there really depends. Like you probably have a sense for the second and the third roles that you're interviewing for. How likely is it that you're going to get that job, right? And also how much more is the salary? How much better is that job?
From a hiring manager's perspective, what are some common mistakes that candidates make in their interview process?
So in the interviews, honestly, the biggest one is rambling, just getting nervous and going on and on. So practice your interviews, like just record yourself and get over the cringe factor. Trust me, I still cringe like when I watch myself on video all the time. You never really get over it, but it's the best way that you can improve on your speaking skills just by watching yourself. And also not having a structured response. So a lot of times when people answer this question of like, tell me about a data project you're proud of, or when you overcame a challenge, a lot of times people will meander, like they'll go through a whole journey and I'm like, where is this going? So practice having a structured response using the STAR framework, the situation, task, action, result, right? If you've been interview preparing, you probably have seen that. And then lastly, one thing I would say is, it's not really a mistake, but I think a lot of people don't seize the opportunity to ask really, really good questions to the interviewer. So think more specifically about like, what are unique questions that you can ask that really demonstrate your interest in the company while also getting more information for yourself about the role.
Thank you so much. Just because our times we have to wrap up here today. So thank you so much, Christine. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, guys.